There's a rule in Pine Ridge. Women are only allowed to leave the mountains 7 times in their lives. If they aren't able to marry a foreigner who's not from Pine Ridge, they can only marry a local mountaineer and become a guardian of the mountain. Because of that, I've borrowed some cosmetics from my grandma 7 times in a row. Every time, I'm often wearing my prettiest dress and waiting for the man who has promised to whisk me away from Pine Ridge to marry me. But despite having crossed the mountain and reached the same town 7 times in a row, Joseph Kingsley is never there. In the village chief, Arthur Langley, has a smoke pipe dangling from his lips. This is your 7th time leaving Pine Ridge, just to get your marriage registered. That director boyfriend of yours has gone over to the next village just to shoot more footage of the lass who has a really pretty smile. Caroline, your boyfriend is already behaving like this. Why are you still waiting for him? I clumsily pull out the phone Joseph has given me before keying in his number. The dial tone goes off 3 times before the call goes through. Only then does Joseph explain the truth to me. When Gemma took us on a foraging trip, she got trapped by one of the bear traps in the mountain. You do realize that if a woman from Pine Ridge were to get crippled, no villager would want to marry her at all because she'd be a burden to them. If I were to leave Gemma alone, her life would be ruined. This is the last time, Caroline. Once I ensure that Gemma's leg gets healed, I'll come marry you right away. Joseph has been in Pine Ridge for 4 years so far. Throughout these years, I've hiked the mountain and braved the elements for him 7 times in a row. But Gemma Watson keeps getting into trouble. Whenever that happens, Joseph will abandon me without hesitation. As I gaze at the phone, which shows that the call has gotten disconnected, I wipe away my tears quietly. There won't be a last time anymore. In 3 days, I will be marrying someone else. There's nothing wrong with life here, in Pine Ridge. Even if you really wanted to leave, you shouldn't have pinned your hopes on a man like that. The village chief, Arthur Langley, took a drag from his pipe and coughed. He carries that camera around all day, filming one woman after another from every village he visits. If he were really worth a damn, he wouldn't have let you make 7 trips to town for nothing. The sharp smell of tobacco made my nose sting. For 4 years, Joseph Kingsley's camera had traveled to every corner of Pine Ridge, filming every woman in every village, everyone except me. I held back my tears and nodded. I won't wait around anymore, Arthur. Let's hold the wedding in 3 days. On my way back to the village, I ran into Joseph as he was bringing Gemma Watson home. He carried her carefully on his back. When he spotted me standing at the fork in the road, he frowned in confusion. Caroline, weren't you supposed to wait for me at the foot of the mountain? We were going to get our marriage license tomorrow. It won't be easy making another trip down now that you've come back. I lowered my head and looked at my heels, where the skin had been rubbed raw from all the climbing. He was right. It hadn't been easy. For the sake of a single promise from him, I had gone down the mountain and back up 7 times. I fought back the sting in my nose.
Today.
We agreed to get our marriage license today. Joseph froze for a moment. I thought I'd explained it to you. Gemma got her leg caught in a trap. That's why I couldn't make it. I looked at Gemma, draped comfortably across his back. There were plenty of people in the team. Why did it have to be you? That's different, he argued. She got hurt while helping me with the documentary. I'm responsible for her. Yeah, I saw the difference. When Gemma got hurt, it was of the utmost importance. When I waited for him to register our marriage, it became something he could break his promise over. He might have noticed the tears gathering in the corners of my eyes, so he softened his tone. I was wrong. Everything had been so chaotic that I forgot to let you know. I shouldn't have made you go down the mountain alone. Just wait another 3 days. The documentary I'm filming about Gemma is almost finished. Once it's done, I'll take you to town to get our marriage license. My fingers slowly curled into my palm, nails digging into my skin. This is already the 7th time. Joseph adjusted Gemma higher on his back, impatience creeping into his voice. I know what you're trying to say, that old Pine Ridge rule. But I already asked Gemma about it, and she said there's no such rule here. You don't have to make things up just for me to marry you, Caroline. I already said I would. I pressed my thumb into the soft flesh between my fingers. So, your reasoning for breaking our promise was that there wasn't such a rule? He frowned. Don't make me out to be that kind of person. I understand that you want me to take you away from Pine Ridge, but this isn't the time for you to make a scene. Make a scene? I mumbled in defeat. The truth was that the old Pine Ridge custom had been abolished years ago. Still, for 4 years, I had crossed mountain after mountain for Joseph. The ridges here stretched endlessly into each other, layer upon layer. Among the women here, 7 trips out of the mountains before marriage were considered the limit. I dipped my head and looked at my leg, swollen like a turnip. Go on. I'm sure Gemma's leg is more important. Joseph walked past me with Gemma on his back. After a few steps, he suddenly turned and said, I was harsh just now. Don't be upset. I'm not. He continued toward the village. I know you. You're kind. You'll understand. I forced a smile. It wasn't that I wasn't upset. There was simply no point in being upset anymore. In 3 days, I would be marrying a man from the neighboring village. Grandma always said that a woman would only get married once in her life. Therefore, a bride should wear a smile on her wedding day. Only then could it be called a perfect union. The next morning, the mountain fog hung thick over the village. By the time Joseph came back, it was already noon. He found me and pulled out his phone. The screen displayed photos of many different elegant wedding dresses. You saw these on my phone before. I remember you said you liked them, he said excitedly. Pick one. Once we go down the mountain, you'll wear it for our wedding. I lifted my rough, chapped hand and gently brushed my finger across the screen. The women of Pine Ridge spent their days working. Year after year, we wore dark, coarse clothes stained by sun, dirt, and labor. For years ago, Joseph had shown me photos from his best friend's wedding. That was the first time I had ever seen a white wedding dress, the first time I saw anything so pure and beautiful. Back then, all I wanted was the chance to wear one someday and walk out of these mountains with him. Now, that chance was gone. It's not needed anymore, I said, shaking my head. Joseph's grip tightened. Are you still upset? No, I answered, looking calmly at him. Grandma already made my wedding dress. The night before, Grandma had taken the satin cloth Arthur brought over and measured me for a wedding dress. After all, I was getting married soon. Joseph smiled and casually swiped through the photos on his phone. Sure, as long as you like it. He went on talking about where we would hold the wedding, what kind of invitation cards we would design, and all the other little details. I didn't hear much of it. It felt as if my ears were filled with water, and all I could hear was a dull ringing. Then, he suddenly stood up with a faded smile. The documentary's entering its final shoot. Just 3 more days of rushing to finish it, and I'll take you down the mountain. He turned and walked away, never seeing the tears that had reddened my eyes. I watched his figure gradually disappear into the endless mountains. Ignoring the pain in my feet, I crouched down and opened the wooden cabinet tucked against the wall. Inside were all the photographs we had taken together over the years. He had written something on the back of each of them. I flipped through them one by one. On the photo taken in the village, he had written, "I'll love Caroline Brown for the rest of my life." On the one where we had watched the sunrise together, he had written, "Caroline's smile is even more breathtaking than the sunrise." After a brief hesitation, I tossed them all into the trash. I sorted through everything piece by piece until only a single wooden hairpin remained in the box. For years ago, Joseph had placed it in my hand and promised he would take me out of these mountains one day. Something prickled my chest. I clutched the hairpin, slowly tightening my grip. I should give it back to him. Limping on my injured foot, I made my way to the neighboring village. There, among fields of flowers and sunlit rocks, Gemma stood in a traditional Aran pleated skirt embroidered with bright patterns. Silver ornaments adorned her hair, glittering beneath the sunlight. Meanwhile, I stood in the shadows, covered in dust and grime, gloomy as a rat hiding in a corner. "Caroline, what are you doing here?" Joseph looked genuinely surprised to see me. Just moments ago, he had been crouched on the ground, carefully applying medicine to Gemma's injured leg. Am I interrupting something? I stood off to the side, my throat so tight it felt as though something was lodged there. He frowned. You're making this sound weirder than it should be. All I'm doing is just treating her injury. Then, without another glance at me, or at the wound on my leg, he lowered his head and gently lifted Gemma's leg again, carefully spreading the ointment over the bruised skin. Suddenly, Gemma turned toward me and switched to fluent Aranese. She knew Joseph couldn't understand a word of it, so her tone immediately sharpened. What are you doing here? I met her gaze. To give you 2 my blessings. She sneered, her eyes full of mockery. Playing the victim card, I see. I don't believe for a second that you'd let Joseph go. And, do you seriously think he's going to leave the mountains with you? It's been 4 years. He was just bored and using you to pass the time while he was stuck here. He much prefers someone like me, radiant and confident, instead of a dull mountain lady like you who spends all day crossing ridges just to wait for him. Besides, you've already wasted all 7 chances to leave. Your fate was sealed a long time ago. My fists clenched. I know. That's why I'm getting married to someone else. I surmised she couldn't believe that I, the woman everyone in Pine Ridge called the devoted fiancé, would ever let go of Joseph. So, she put on a show and burst into tears. With a dramatic sob, she switched back to the local language. Caroline, I swear nothing is going on between Joseph and me. How could you say such horrible things about me? Joseph couldn't understand Aranese, yet without the slightest hesitation, he decided I was the one at fault and immediately defended Gemma. Caroline, there should be a limit to your jealousy. Gemma got hurt because of me. There has never been anything improper between us. I looked at him, then snapped the wooden hairpin in half before tossing the broken pieces onto the ground. My tongue pressed against the root of my mouth as I forced the words out. Don't worry. It won't happen again. We're over, Joseph. Joseph's grip tightened around the tube of ointment. The green medicine squeezed out between his fingers and spilled all over his palm. Caroline, what did you just say? We're over, I repeated. For some reason, he looked more repulsed than shocked. I told you I'd marry you. Can you stop using this kind of trick to force me into doing so? I met his distant gaze and nodded.
Yeah.
I failed in forcing you to marry me, so now I'm marrying someone else. He sneered coldly. If you really wanted to break up with me, you wouldn't have come here and put on this act today. Weren't you humiliating Gemma just now because you wanted to pressure me into marrying you? I said I would. Why do you have to keep getting jealous over nothing? With that, he turned around and continued tending to Gemma's wound, ignoring the tears gathering in my eyes. I stared at his back. My legs were growing heavier by the second, trembling beyond my control. Still, I gritted my teeth and walked away as best as I could. I just wanted to get far away from the sight of them. Suddenly, Joseph called my name. I stopped. Deep inside, a flicker of hope was still aflame. The filing schedule is too tight, so I won't be going home tonight, he said. I'll stay at Gemma's. Once the filming is finished in 3 days, we'll head to town and get our marriage license. I said nothing and kept walking. The 30-minute mountain path took me a full hour to finish. When I finally reached home, my legs gave out. I collapsed onto the doorstep. Grandma heard the commotion and rushed out. Caroline, what happened to you? I parted my lips, but no sound came out. Overwhelming me was the burning, throbbing sensation in my leg. The moment Grandma pulled up my pant leg, she gasped in horror. The flesh around my ankle was blackened and badly infected. My whole foot was so swollen it looked thicker than a turnip. It was almost impossible to recognize what it had once looked like. The women of Pine Ridge survived with their hands and feet. Farming, carrying firewood, climbing mountains, working from dawn till dusk. Everything depended on their legs. Grandma's eyes reddened. She knelt down and gently held my leg, her voice cracking with heartache. Silly child, why don't you ever take care of yourself? That man has broken your heart 1,000,000 times. Now that you've ruined your leg for him, how are you supposed to live the rest of your life now? I looked down, tears silently falling onto the back of my hand. Of course, I could feel pain, exhaustion, and fear. I used to always hold on to a small piece of stubborn hope, believing that if I tried just one more time and waited a little longer, I would eventually get what I wanted. Grandma wiped away my tears, her voice hoarse. It's a good thing your marriage has been arranged. Let's proceed in 3 days. Your future husband is honest and kind. He'll know how to cherish you. I closed my eyes. The endless ache spread from my chest to every inch of my body. The next day, Joseph returned. Gemma was still on his back. Why are you sitting here? I kept quiet. It wasn't until he walked closer and saw my badly infected ankle that he looked startled. The next second, though, his expression darkened. What exactly are you trying to do here, Caroline? Gemma hurt her leg, and you did the same to yourself? Do you know her leg got infected again? Are you trying to use something like this just to get my attention? I told you I'll leave the mountains with you. Can you stop acting so petulant just because you have my love? Petulant. I tried to lift my leg. No matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't move. Even when I had come down to this miserable state, to Joseph, I was just acting petulant. I closed my eyes, tears finally rolling down my face. I'm getting married to someone else. He glared at me. Again with this tantrum? I'm taking Gemma to town to see a doctor. While I'm away, you'd better reflect on yourself. With that, he left without looking back. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During that period, Joseph was busy finishing the documentary. He never came to see me again. Sometimes, when he saw me from a distance, all that remained in his eyes was disgust. I stopped explaining myself to him. On the day of my wedding, the sky was only beginning to brighten when Grandma woke me up. She did my hair and helped me put on my wedding clothes. The heavy, traditional Aran wedding dress settled onto my clothes. It felt so heavy that I could barely breathe. Grandma held my hand and gently patted it. Ladies from our mountains, marriage is where we find our home. Once you live a steady life, things won't feel as hard anymore. I nodded. When I stepped out of the doorway, the loud sound of cheering filled the air. May the bride now step into the bridal carriage. As the carriage was wheeled forward, my phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket. The screen lit up with an incoming call from Joseph. I stared at it for a long time, so long that the carriage had moved at a uniform speed before I slowly answered. "Where are you?" "In the bridal carriage." He seemed not to hear me clearly. Before he could respond, a staff member's voice came through the phone. "Mr. Kingsley, a traditional errand is happening up ahead. It's very authentic. We just made it in time for the final shoot. If we film this, it'll be the perfect closing scene for the documentary." Joseph chuckled. "Sure. We'll film the wedding." Then came his nonchalant voice. "We're getting the final shot, Caroline. The documentary is almost done. You can wrap up your little jealousy act and all. Once this is over, we're getting married." I sat inside the gently rocking coach and listened quietly. Then the call ended just like that. The bridal carriage continued forward, rocking along the mountain path. Before long, it came to a sudden stop. I could hear footsteps and the sound of a camera being adjusted outside. Then, I heard Joseph's bright voice. "We're filming local customs and daily life in Pine Ridge. We'd appreciate your cooperation for a few shots. This will be the final footage for our documentary." A hand with distinct knuckles opened the coach door. Blinding sunlight poured into the tiny space. I looked up and met Joseph's frozen gaze. He was still holding the camera, a smile frozen on his lips. The lens slowly adjusted focus, locking in on me in my wedding dress, perfectly and unmistakably. The camera in Joseph's hand trembled. The heavy metal lens knocked against the wooden frame of the carriage with a sharp, hollow clack. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The festive gongs and drums of the wedding procession suddenly felt incredibly loud, beating against my eardrums like a feverish pulse. "Caroline?" Joseph's voice was barely a whisper. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the handle of his camera. "What is this? What are you doing in there?" He looked at the heavy, dark red errand bridal gown I wore, embroidered with thick silver threads that caught the harsh mountain sunlight. He looked at the silver crown resting on my head, its dangling tassels brushing against my cheeks. Most of all, he looked at my face, neatly washed, my lips painted a deep, traditional red with the cosmetics I had borrowed from Grandma. "I told you," I said, my voice flat and quiet, carrying no anger, no sorrow, just an exhausting emptiness. "I am getting married today." "Stop it," Joseph said, a nervous laugh escaping his lips. He reached out, his hand hovering near my shoulder as if to pull me out of the carriage. "This has gone too far. If you wanted to teach me a lesson for leaving you at the foot of the mountain, fine. You've done it. I'm scared, okay? I'm worried. Now get down. We have to finish this shoot, and then we're going to town." Behind him, Gemma limped forward, her arm resting lightly on his shoulder for support. When she saw me sitting in the carriage, her eyes widened in genuine surprise, followed quickly by a flicker of calculation. "Caroline, is this a joke?" Gemma asked, her voice dripping with mock concern. "You can't just rent a bridal carriage and put on a show like this. You're holding up the crew. Joseph has been working day and night to finish this documentary. Do you have any idea how much pressure he's under?" I didn't look at Gemma. I kept my eyes on Joseph. For years, I had spent 4 years memorizing every line of his face, every shift in his expression. I used to be able to tell exactly when he was tired, when he was inspired, and when he was growing impatient with me. Right now, I saw a rare, mounting panic in his eyes. But even then, his first instinct wasn't to ask me how my leg was or who I was marrying. His first instinct was to assume I was playing a game. The auspicious hour is passing. A firm, deep voice called out from the front of the procession. A tall man stepped into the space between Joseph and the carriage door. It was Caleb Vance, my groom. Caleb was from the neighboring village, just over the ridge. He was a quiet, sturdy man who worked the timber lines and kept to himself. Unlike Joseph, who always wore clean, branded outdoor gear and carried expensive equipment, Caleb wore a simple, dark blue Aran jacket with brass buttons. His face was sun-bronzed, his shoulders broad, and his hands were thick and calloused from hard labor. "Please step aside," Caleb said to Joseph. His voice was calm, but possessed a heavy weight that made the surrounding crew members quiet down. "You are blocking my bride's path." Joseph's eyes snapped to Caleb, his panic instantly hardening into defensive anger. "Your bride? Who the hell are you?" "Caroline is my fiancée. We've been together for 4 years." What kind of sick local scam is this? Joseph, I called out, my voice sharp enough to cut through his rising temper. Caleb is not scamming anyone. I agreed to this marriage. My grandmother approved it. Arthur Langley witnessed it. There is no scam. Joseph shook his head, taking a step backward as if the words physically pushed him. No. That's impossible. You love me. You walked down the mountain 7 times for me. You wouldn't just marry some stranger from the ridges. Caroline, look at me. Tell me you're doing this to get back at me. I am not trying to get back at you, Joseph, I said. I looked down at my hands, resting on the heavy fabric of my skirt. I am just tired of waiting at the foot of the mountain. I told you I was coming, Joseph shouted, his voice cracking. He ignored the whispers of his crew and the glaring eyes of the villagers holding the wedding banners. I told you I had to take care of Gemma first. Her leg was infected. Are you really that heartless? You're going to ruin our 4 years together over a 3-day delay. It wasn't a 3-day delay, Joseph, I murmured. It was 4 years of delays. And today is the limit. Caleb didn't say another word to Joseph. He turned his back on him, reached into the carriage, and gently took my hand. His palm was warm and rough completely, covering my cold, trembling fingers. Let's go home, Caroline, Caleb said softly. I nodded. Caleb closed the wooden door of the carriage, shutting out the blinding sunlight and the sight of Joseph's pale, frozen face. With a loud shout from the village elders, the gongs and drums started up again, and the carriage began to rock forward, leaving Joseph and his cameras behind in the mountain dust. The journey to the neighboring village took 2 hours. Through the small wooden slats of the carriage window, I watched the familiar ridges of Pine Ridge slowly recede into the blue mountain mist. Every bump in the road sent a sharp, shooting pain up my infected ankle, but I gritted my teeth and kept silent. I didn't want to ruin the wedding day. In our mountains, a bride who cried or showed pain on her wedding day was thought to bring hardship to her new household. I had already brought enough trouble to myself. I wouldn't bring it to Caleb. When the carriage finally stopped, the door opened, and Caleb stood there. He didn't ask me to step down. Instead, he turned his back to me and crouched slightly. The path to the house is steep and rocky, Caleb said, his voice low and steady. Let me carry you. I hesitated. Caleb, the silver ornaments, they are very heavy. And my clothes. I am strong, he interrupted gently, turning his head slightly to give me a reassuring nod. I carry logs twice your weight down the mountain every day. Trust me. Slowly, I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around his broad shoulders. He lifted me effortlessly, his grip firm and secure beneath my thighs. As he carried me toward the wooden house decorated with red paper cutouts, the villagers cheered, throwing dried corn and red beans over us for good luck. Inside, the house was warm and smelled of pine needles and roasted chestnuts. Caleb's mother, a kind-faced woman with deep wrinkles around her eyes, welcomed us with a cup of hot sweet ginger tea. She didn't look at me with pity or suspicion, even though everyone in the 3 ridges knew I was the girl who had chased a city man for 4 years. She simply took my hand, took the heavy silver crown off my head to ease my neck, and smiled. You've had a long journey, child, she said, her voice soft. Sit down. Caleb, go fetch the hot water and the herbal wash. I looked at Caleb in surprise. The herbal wash. Caleb set me down on a low wooden bench covered with a soft woolen blanket. I saw how you walked yesterday when you returned from the neighboring ridge, he said, kneeling down in front of me without hesitation. Your grandmother told me your ankle was badly hurt. I asked the village doctor for some black pine root and wild ginger last night. My breath hitched. When Joseph saw my swollen leg, his first thought was that I was throwing a tantrum, trying to copy Gemma to get his attention. But Caleb, who had barely spoken 50 words to me before our wedding day, had noticed my limp from a distance and spent his night gathering medicine. Caleb carefully rolled up the heavy embroidered hem of my bridal skirt. When he peeled back the rough cotton sock, both he and his mother let out a quiet, sharp breath. My ankle was twice its normal size, the skin stretched tight and shiny, turning a sickly, dark purple around the joint. A small, ragged cut from a sharp rock on my last trek down the mountain had festered, oozing yellow fluid. Oh, you poor thing, Caleb's mother whispered, her eyes filling with tears. How did you walk on this? How did you stand the pain? I had to go down, I said, my voice barely audible as a tear slipped down my
Cheek.
I had to go down one last time. Caleb didn't say anything. His jaw clenched tightly, a muscle jumping in his
Cheek.
He took a clean linen cloth, dipped it into the steaming basin of dark herbal water his mother brought, and gently pressed it against my swollen skin. The heat was agonizing, making me gasp and clutch the edge of the wooden bench. Caleb immediately stopped, looking up at me with deep concern in his dark eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "It's going to hurt, but we have to draw out the
Poison.
otherwise, you won't be able to walk by winter." "I can take it," I said, squeezing my eyes shut. "Please, Caleb, do it." He worked with incredible gentleness, his large, rough hands moving with a precision I didn't expect from a woodcutter. He cleaned the wound, applied a thick, cooling green paste made of crushed herbs, and wrapped it neatly in clean, white bandages. When he was done, the throbbing pain in my leg had transformed into a cool, soothing ache. For the first time in weeks, my body felt light, as if a heavy stone had been lifted from my chest. "Thank you," I whispered. Caleb looked up from where he was kneeling. He didn't move away. He stayed there, his hand resting lightly near my bandaged foot. "Caroline," he said, his voice serious and steady. "I know I am not the man you wanted. I am not a city director, and I cannot show you the world through a camera lens. But as long as you are in this house, I will never make you walk the mountain paths alone. You will never have to wait for me at the foot of the ridge." Looking at his honest, unpretentious face, the last remaining knot of grief in my heart slowly began to untangle. I reached out and gently touched his shoulder. "I don't want to go to the city anymore, Caleb," I said. "I just want a home where I can rest my feet." Meanwhile, back in the village of Pine Ridge, the atmosphere in Joseph's production crew was suffocating. After the bridal carriage left, Joseph had stood frozen on the dirt road for nearly an hour. The camera, which he usually treated like his own life, sat forgotten on a wooden crate. "Joseph, we need to pack up," Gemma said, her voice tight with irritation.
She
Was sitting on a folding chair, adjusting the bandage on her leg. "The light is changing. If we don't shoot the B-roll of the terrace fields now, we'll lose the whole afternoon." Joseph didn't seem to hear her. He turned his head slowly, looking toward the trail that led to the neighboring village. "She was wearing the red dress," he muttered, his voice hollow. "What?" Gemma frowned. "The traditional Aran wedding dress," Joseph said, his eyes unfocused. "Her grandmother made it. She told me yesterday, but I thought she was just trying to make me jealous. I thought she was exaggerating." Gemma let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Joseph, please. She's just playing a
game.
You know how these mountain girls are. They have nothing else to do but obsess over marriage. She probably hired those villagers to stage a fake wedding, just to frighten you into registering the marriage today. She'll be back tomorrow, crying and apologizing." Joseph turned to look at Gemma. For the first time in 4 years, his gaze was cold, devoid of the gentle warmth he usually reserved for her. "A fake wedding?" Joseph asked, his voice rising slightly. "Do you know how sacred weddings are to the Aran people? Do you know what it means for a woman to put on that silver crown?" Arthur Langley was there, Gemma. The village chief.
He
Wouldn't participate in a stunt. Gemma's face paled slightly, but she quickly recovered, biting her lip to look small and vulnerable. "Why are you raising your voice at me? I didn't do anything wrong. I got hurt because of your documentary. If I hadn't gone up that ridge to find that specific flower for your shot, I wouldn't have stepped in that trap." Joseph closed his eyes, rubbing his temples. The guilt that Gemma always used to bind him suddenly felt incredibly heavy and suffocating. "I'm going to the village chief," Joseph said, grabbing his jacket from the back of a chair. "Joseph, wait. The shoot." "The shoot is paused," he snapped, not looking back as he walked toward Arthur Langley's stone house. When Joseph arrived, Arthur was sitting on his wooden porch, slowly packing tobacco into his long brass pipe. The old man didn't look up when he heard Joseph's heavy, hurried footsteps. "Arthur," Joseph gasped, out of breath. "The wedding today? Caroline's not real, right? She's just angry with me. She's trying to teach me a lesson." Arthur took his time lighting his pipe. He blew out a thick ring of blue smoke, his weathered eyes staring at the distant, mist-shroused peaks. "Young man," Arthur said, his voice gravelly and calm, "in Pine Ridge, we do not play with the spirits of the mountain. A wedding is a wedding. Caroline is now the wife of Caleb Vance." Joseph felt a cold dread drop into his stomach. But she's my fiancé.
We're
We're going to get married. I bought the plane tickets for next week. I have the photos of the wedding dresses on my phone. Arthur let out a dry, rattling cough. And how many times did she wear those dresses, Joseph? How many times did she stand at the registry office in town, waiting for a man who never showed up? I had reasons, Joseph argued, his voice turning desperate. Gemma was hurt. The documentary. The mountain does not care about your documentary, Arthur interrupted, his voice suddenly turning cold and hard as stone. The rules of Pine Ridge are old. Joseph, a woman has 7 chances to leave. Each time she crosses the ridge, she
gives a piece of her soul to the mountain.
Caroline crossed it 7 times for
You.
7 times she returned, empty-handed, her feet bleeding, her heart broken. Arthur stood up, tapping the ashes from his pipe against the wooden railing.
He
Looked Joseph dead in the eye. You think she was throwing a tantrum? Caroline's leg is festering.
She walked
3 miles on a rotting ankle yesterday just to return your hairpin and end things cleanly. She gave you 4 years of her youth, 4 years of her devotion, and you treated her like a nuisance. Now, she has married Caleb. She will never leave these mountains.
She has
become a guardian of the ridge, just like her grandmother before her. Her 7 trips are gone, Joseph. You took them all, and you gave her nothing in return. Joseph stumbled back, his face completely devoid of color. No, that rule. Gemma said it wasn't real. She said she asked around, and there was no such custom. Arthur let out a bitter, mocking laugh. Gemma Watson is a girl from the valley, who's been here for 3 months. What does she know of our laws?
Caroline
Kept that rule because she believed in it. She believed that if she couldn't leave with you by the 7th time, she was destined to stay here forever.
And
you proved her right. Joseph's phone suddenly rang in his pocket. He pulled it out with trembling hands. It was his producer from the city, asking about the progress of the documentary. Joseph looked at the screen, then at the endless, towering mountains surrounding him. For the first time, those green ridges didn't look like beautiful footage. For his camera, they looked like a giant, inescapable prison. A week passed. In the neighboring village, my life with Caleb was quiet and peaceful. My leg was healing remarkably fast thanks to the herbal poultices Caleb applied. Every morning and evening, the black, infected flesh had fallen away, replaced by healthy pink skin. Although I still walked with a slight limp, the agonizing pain was gone. Caleb's house was simple, but it was filled with warmth. Every morning before he went up the timberline, he would chop enough firewood to last the day, fill the water basins, and leave a sweet potato roasting in the hearth for my breakfast. I spent my days helping his mother with the weaving. The Aaron people were famous for their intricate blue and white blankets, woven on heavy wooden looms that clicked and clacked in a rhythmic, soothing lullaby. As my shuttle flew back and forth through the threads, I felt a deep sense of peace I hadn't known in 4 years. I didn't have to check my phone every 5 minutes. I didn't have to wonder if Joseph was eating well, or if he was filming another beautiful girl in some far-off valley. I didn't have to worry about Gemma's endless emergencies. One afternoon, while Caleb's mother was napping, I sat on the porch, washing some wild mountain cabbage in a wooden tub. The sound of heavy, uneven footsteps on the gravel path made me freeze. I looked up. Standing at the gate of our yard was Joseph. He looked terrible. His hair was messy, his face was covered in a rough stubble, and his eyes were bloodshot and hollow. He was wearing the same jacket he had worn on our wedding day, now stained with mud and pine sap. When he saw me sitting on the porch, his eyes lit up with a desperate, frantic hope. He took a step forward, clutching the wooden gate. Caroline, he whispered. I didn't stand up. I didn't drop the cabbage in my hand. I simply looked at him, my heart remaining remarkably still. What are you doing here, Joseph? I asked, my voice calm. I've been looking for you, he said, his voice cracking. I went to your grandmother's house, but she wouldn't let me in. She threw water at me. I had to ask 3 different woodcutters before I found where Caleb Vance lives. You shouldn't have come, I said. This is Caleb's home. It is my home now. No, it's not. Joseph cried out, his hands gripping the wooden slats of the gate so hard his knuckles turned purple. Caroline, please. Come back with me. I've packed everything. The documentary is finished. I sent the final cut to the studio yesterday. We can leave for the city tonight. I bought the plane tickets. Look. He fumbled with his phone, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. He held up the screen, showing me 2 digital boarding passes. I bought them for us, he sobbed, tears finally spilling down his dusty cheeks. We can get married in the city. We can get the license tomorrow. I'll buy you the most beautiful white dress you saw on my phone. Any dress you want. Just come with me, please. I looked at the digital boarding passes on his screen. 4 years ago, if he had shown me this, I would have cried with joy. I would have packed my single wooden suitcase and followed him to the ends of the earth. But now, looking at those tickets, I felt nothing but a profound sense of exhaustion. Joseph, I said softly, standing up with the help of a wooden cane Caleb had carved for me. I limped to the edge of the porch. Do you see my leg? He looked down at my bandaged ankle, his breath catching. It was infected, I said. The doctor said, if I had walked down the mountain one more time, the poison would have reached my bone. I would have lost my foot. I didn't know, Joseph stammered, his voice filled with horror.
You
didn't tell me. I tried to tell you. I interrupted, my voice steady. But you told me I was acting petulant. You told me I was throwing a tantrum to copy Gemma. You told me to reflect on myself. I was wrong, Joseph screamed, dropping to his knees on the gravel path.
He
reached through the gate, trying to grasp the hem of my skirt, but he couldn't
reach.
I was a fool, Caroline. I was blind. Gemma told me there was no 7 times rule. She told me you were just making it up to pressure me.
I
believed her because I was stressed about the documentary. I thought you would always be there. That's the problem, Joseph, I said, looking down at him. You always thought I would be there, waiting at the foot of the mountain, no matter how many times. You broke your promise. But even a mountain girl has her limits. I'll make it up to you, he begged, his forehead pressing against the rough wood of the gate. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please, Caroline, don't stay here in this dirty, backward village. You wanted to see the
city.
You wanted to see the ocean. I promised I would show you. I don't need to see the ocean anymore, Joseph, I said. The mountain streams are enough for me. Before Joseph could say another word, the wooden gate was pushed open from the outside. Caleb stood there, carrying a heavy bundle of freshly cut pine branches on his back. His eyes swept over Joseph, kneeling in the dirt, and then moved to me. Standing on the porch. Caroline, Caleb said, his voice calm but possessing an undercurrent of iron. Is this man bothering you? Joseph scrambled to his feet, trying to regain some of his dignity. He glared at Caleb, his jealousy and anger boiling over. You, Joseph shouted, pointing a finger at Caleb's chest. You took advantage of her. You knew she was angry with me, and you used your backward village customs to trap her here. She doesn't belong to you. She belongs in the city, with me. Caleb didn't drop his bundle of wood. He walked past Joseph as if he were nothing but a gust of wind, set the heavy pine branches neatly by the woodpile, and then walked over to the porch. He stood right beside me, his large hand gently resting on my waist. The warmth of his palms seeped through my clothes, giving me an immense sense of security. Caroline is not a piece of timber, Mr. Kingsley, Caleb said, his voice flat and steady, eyes locked onto Joseph's. She is not something you can leave at the foot of the mountain and pick up whenever it pleases you. She is my wife. She chose to enter my house, and I chose to welcome her. She only chose you because she was desperate. Joseph yelled, his face twisting in pain. She loved me. For 4 years, she loved me. Ask her if she ever loved you. Caleb turned his head slightly, looking down at me. There was no doubt in his eyes, no demand for reassurance. There was only a quiet, patient wait. I looked at Joseph, the man I had loved with every fiber of my being for 4 long years. I remembered the cold nights I spent waiting for him at the bus station in town, the way my heart would leap when I saw his flashlight coming up the trail, and the bitter, freezing tears I cried when he didn't show up. I loved you, Joseph, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet courtyard. I loved you so much that I was willing to give up my home, my grandmother, and my mountains for you. I gave you 7 chances. Each time I walked down that mountain, I was praying that you would be there to hold my hand and tell me it was worth it. Joseph's eyes filled with fresh tears. I'm here now, Caroline. I'm here. But you're too late, I said. The 7th time was the end. When I stood in that town alone last week, watching the sun go down, and the registration office close its doors. My love for you died. It didn't die because of Caleb or because of the village rules. It died because you killed it, piece by piece. Every time you chose Gemma over me. I didn't choose her. Joseph wept. She was just a subject for my documentary. It was just work. If it was just work, why did you spend your nights at her house? I asked, my voice finally carrying a trace of bitterness. Why did you care so much about her leg getting infected while you didn't even notice that my foot was rotting away? Joseph opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at my bandaged leg, then at Caleb's hand resting securely on my waist. The stark contrast between Caleb's quiet care and his own neglect was a truth he could no longer deny. Go back to the city, Joseph, I said softly. Build your career. Release your documentary. But leave Pine Ridge and leave me alone. I turned around and walked back into the warm house, Caleb following closely. Behind us, the wooden door clicked shut, leaving Joseph alone in the cold, gray mountain fog. The next day, the production crew of the documentary packed their gear and left Pine Ridge. From the porch of our house, I watched the line of silver off-road vehicles slowly snake down the winding mountain pass, their headlights cutting through the thick morning mist like tiny, dying stars. I felt a strange, quiet sense of relief. The final thread connecting me to my past had been severed. 2 weeks later, Caleb and I went to the town at the foot of the mountain. It wasn't to register our marriage. Our traditional Aaron wedding was already recognized by the local council through Arthur Langley's official petition. We went because Caleb wanted to take me to the county hospital to have my leg checked by a specialist. The bone is perfectly fine, the doctor said, looking at the x-rays. The infection was deep, but whoever cleaned and treated it did an excellent job. The herbal poultice prevented the poison from spreading. You just need to rest it for another month, and you'll be walking without a limp. I looked at Caleb, who was standing quietly by the window, his hands tucked into his pockets. A small, relieved smile played on his lips. As we walked out of the hospital, the afternoon sun was warm and bright. The town was busy, filled with the sounds of car horns, shouting street vendors, and music playing from local shops. It was the same town I had visited 7 times in a row, always wearing my prettiest dress, always filled with a desperate, anxious hope that ended in heartbreak. But today, wearing a simple blue cotton skirt and comfortable flat shoes, my hand held securely in Caleb's warm palm, the town didn't look hostile or lonely anymore. It was just a place we were visiting, and we had a home to return to. Are you hungry? Caleb asked, looking down at me. A little. I smiled. He took me to a small noodle shop near the bus station. We sat by the window, eating hot, spicy beef noodles while the steam fogged up the glass. As we ate, my eyes caught a small television screen hanging in the corner of the shop. It was playing a local cultural channel. And next, we have a preview of the highly anticipated documentary, The Daughters of Pine Ridge, directed by the award-winning young director Joseph Kingsley. The host's voice echoed through the noisy shop. I froze, my chopsticks hovering in midair. Caleb noticed my stillness and looked up, his eyes following my gaze to the television screen. The screen filled with beautiful, sweeping shots of the mist-shrouded peaks of Pine Ridge. The cinematography was breathtaking, capturing the raw, wild beauty of our home. Then, the camera focused on the local women, their bright smiles, their heavy silver ornaments, their hands working the looms and farming the terraced fields. And then, the final scene of the trailer played. It was the shot from our wedding day. The camera angle was raw and shaky, capturing the exact moment Joseph had opened the wooden door of the bridal carriage. Blinding sunlight poured into the space, illuminating me in my traditional Aaron wedding dress. But instead of the radiant, happy bride Joseph had probably envisioned for his grand finale, the camera captured my face in sharp, painful detail. My eyes were cold and empty, devoid of any joy, staring directly into the lens as if looking through Joseph's soul. Even in the brief, 3-second clip, the profound sadness and indifference in my gaze were unmistakable. It was a shot that didn't celebrate a beautiful local custom. It captured the silent, agonizing death of a woman's love. The trailer ended with a slow fade to black, followed by the credits. It's a beautiful shot, Caleb said softly, his voice carrying no jealousy, only a quiet understanding. It was the last time he ever looked at me, I said, putting my chopsticks down. And the first time he actually saw me. I reached across the table and took Caleb's hand. Let's go home, Caleb.
The fog.
is going to roll in soon, and the mountain paths are difficult in the dark. Caleb smiled, his dark eyes filled with a deep, steady warmth.
Yes.
Let's go. Home. 3 months later. The winter had arrived in Pine Ridge, dusting the green peaks with a pristine, glittering coat of white snow. Inside our wooden house, the hearth crackled with dry pine logs, filling the room with a warm, comforting heat. My leg had fully healed. I could walk, run, and even climb the lower ridges without any pain or limp. Caleb and I had settled into a comfortable, quiet routine. We worked together, laughed together, and spent our evenings sitting by the fire, listening to his mother tell old stories of the mountain spirits. I had truly become a daughter of the ridge, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely whole. One evening, Arthur Langley knocked on our door. He was wearing a heavy wool coat, his brass pipe dangling from his lips as usual. He stepped into the house, shaking the snow from his boots, and sat by the hearth. "I have some news from the city," Arthur said, taking a drag from his pipe.
He
Looked at me, his eyes gentle. "Regarding that director boy, Joseph." I paused my weaving, looking at him quietly. Caleb sat beside me, placing his hand over mine. "What happened?" I asked. Arthur let out a slow sigh. His documentary, The Daughters of Pine Ridge, was released last month. It was a huge success. The critics praised his raw, emotional style, especially that final shot of the bride in the carriage.
they
Called it a masterpiece of human tragedy. I felt a faint, distant pinch in my chest, but it quickly faded. I'm glad his work was recognized. That's what he always wanted. But that's not the end of the story, Arthur continued, a grim smile playing on his weathered face. The studio wanted him to do a follow-up series.
they
Offered him a massive contract, fame, money, everything he had ever dreamed of. But he turned it down. They say he had a massive falling out with that girl, Gemma. Apparently, someone from her village revealed that her leg injury was never serious. She had deliberately exaggerated it, even bribing a local clinic worker to falsify her medical records just to keep Joseph in the mountains so he would help her with her own career. When Joseph found out, he went mad. He sued her, broke off all contact, and abandoned the project. He's no longer directing Caroline. They say he sold all his expensive camera gear and spent his days sitting in a small apartment in the city, drinking and staring at the unused plane tickets he bought for you. The room fell silent, save for the crackling of the pine wood in the hearth. I looked down at my hands, now warm and supple, no longer chapped and bleeding.
from the freezing mountain treks.
I felt no joy in Joseph's downfall, nor did I feel any satisfaction in his regret. He had finally gotten the truth, but it was a truth that could no longer change anything. He had traded a lifetime of genuine, unwavering devotion for a temporary illusion, and now he had to live with the empty space he had created. "Thank you for telling me, Arthur," I said quietly. "But his life in the city has nothing to do with me anymore." Arthur smiled, nodding slowly. "I knew you'd say that, child. You've always been stronger than those city folks." He stood up, bid us good night, and stepped back out into the quiet, snowy night. Caleb turned to me, his dark eyes searching my face. "Caroline, do you have any regrets?" I leaned my head against his broad shoulder, smelling the clean scent of pine and fresh snow that always clung to him. "No," I whispered, closing my eyes in complete peace. "I have no regrets.
The
mountain has 7 paths out, Caleb, but I only needed one to lead me to you." Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping Pine Ridge in a silent, beautiful embrace, guarding the secrets of the mountains and the hearts of those who chose
to stay.